These are 10 episodes where Peter Griffin deserved to go to jail, starting at number 10 with an episode titled April in Quahog. The episode opens with a news report about a black hole that will destroy all life on Earth within 24 hours. The news sends the residents of Quahog into a panic, with everyone rushing to fulfill their final wishes. Lois wants the family to spend their last day together, but Peter has other priorities. He goes to the zoo to steal a lion, tries to save a Native American family with a musket, and then yells a racial slur in a black neighborhood. Peter returns home just in time for the final minutes of Earth's existence. Lois tears into him for spending the entire day away from his family, and Peter confesses that he just hates being around kids. At that exact moment, the news anchors announce the whole report was an April Fool's prank. Peter doesn't even try to backtrack and continues to explain why he doesn't enjoy being around his kids. The next morning, he tries to win back their love by bonding with Meg about her period, offering Chris crystal meth, and doing the same in front of Stewie. When all that fails, he buys them an Xbox, but then he hogs it for himself, leaving the kids to watch. Number 9 on the list is Papa Has a Role in Son, an episode where Peter's daddy issues almost ruin everything for Joe. The guys realize none of them have met Joe's dad, Bud, because they are estranged. Without asking any questions, Peter contacts Bud and invites him to town for Father's Day. Joe and the guys try to hide Joe's disability, deciding the simplest plan is for Peter and Joe to switch places. Bud and Peter get along great, but Bud is terrible to Peter, who is actually Joe. Peter, joining in on the insults, even makes fun of his own kids. Peter offers Bud a place to live, effectively stealing Joe's father. Joe finally reaches his boiling point and gets into a heated brawl with Peter. When Bud calls out Joe for getting beat up by a guy in a wheelchair, Joe reveals his true identity. Bud comes clean about being ableist out of fear of it happening to himself, and the two agree to work on their relationship. All it took was Peter stealing Joe's dad, insulting his disability, and forcing him into a fight to bring them back together. Taking the number 8 spot on the list is an episode titled Family Gay. Peter returns from grocery shopping with a brain-damaged horse instead of food. Peter finds a use for the horse. Some of the milk in the fridge is not milk, but horse sperm. Peter enters the horse in a race, but it runs into the crowd, causing $100,000 in damages and then suffering a fatal heart attack. To pay the debt, Peter becomes a test subject for a medical experiment, where he's injected with the gay gene. The results are hilarious to Peter, but not so much for Lois. Lois struggles with Peter's new sexuality, which is made even harder when Peter rejects her sexual advances. With no way to reverse the effects, Lois is left with a gay husband, who runs off with his soulmate, Scott. Brian and Stewie, seeing Lois's depression, kidnap Peter and send him to a conversion therapy camp. When Scott comes looking for Peter, Lois decides to pull Peter out of the camp and let him live his life how he wants. As soon as Peter returns to his new life, the gay gene wears off in the middle of a welcome home orgy. Peter returns home and vows to never speak of the events again. American Gigolo is number 7 on the list, as the episode gives us Quagmire in a role he was truly born for. Quagmire, a striking pilot, gets mistaken for a stripper and decides to play along for the money. The guys track Quagmire to a strip club, where they discover he's become a gigolo. Peter helps Quagmire collect his pay from a client who stiffed him. Quagmire gives Peter a cut of the money and asks him to be his pimp. At first, it's fun, but Peter starts to overbook him, leaving Quagmire exhausted and abused. Peter abuses his power, insulting, hitting, and overworking Quagmire. Peter even forces Quagmire to work for his food. The worst customer that Peter forces him to work for starts asking Quagmire to do weird German sexual things. Thankfully, Peter steps in before it goes too far. Peter apologizes, and Quagmire forgives him, hoping the pilot strike will end soon so he can get his job back. Peter then reveals that the strike ended a month ago, and he just never told him. The number 6 spot as an episode, one have to be extremely careful in how I pronounce petarded. At game night, Lois lets Peter win a game of Trivial Pursuit. Peter, insufferable after his win, is challenged by Brian to apply for the MacArthur Genius Grant. He takes the test and gets his results back, finding out he's not a genius, but is mentally incapacitated. Peter starts abusing his newfound power, getting away with everything from starting Bible fights to busting into women's toilets. But the worst of all is what he does to Lois. His actions leave Lois with severe burns, and Child Protective Services takes the kids away. Cleveland offers to take the kids in while Peter figures things out. Brian tells Peter to prove he's a good parent, but Peter takes this to mean he has to show how bad of a parent Cleveland is. He invites prostitutes into Cleveland's home while Stewie is there and calls the CPS agent. The agent sees through the ruse and takes Peter to trial. Peter, in a heartfelt plea, narrowly escapes prison time but doesn't get his kids back. Lois, fully healed, brings home the kids, and Peter suffers no consequences for nearly killing Tom Tucker, severely burning his wife, and framing his best friend. Halfway marker now, and the Tan Aquatic with Steve Zissou is the episode at the number 5 spot. Herbert has a new paperboy, Kyle, who bullies Chris. After Kyle beats up Chris, Peter goes to Kyle's parents to talk about their son. Peter ends up being the victim of Kyle's bullying and retaliates by brutally beating the hell out of him. Peter leaves Kyle bruised and bleeding and runs home, where he tries to play it off. Lois drags him to apologize to Kyle, whose mom agrees not to press charges. Kyle and Peter bond over bullying, and Peter is encouraged to continue bullying people to feel good about himself. He starts to bully and abuse Lois, Stewie, Meg, and Joe. Lois tells Peter he's no better than his own childhood bully. This snaps Peter out of it, and he decides to stand up to his own bully, Randy Fuller. Peter finds Randy on crutches and learns he has MS. Peter goes to hit him anyway. But Chris stops him and teaches Peter a lesson that violence isn't the answer by beating him up instead. Going into the number 4 spot with an episode titled The Shot in the Dark. Peter and the guys start a community watch. They get guns, and during his first night watch, Peter sees a shadowy figure trying to get into Cleveland's house. Peter fires a shot and hits Cleveland Jr. The police deem the shooting an accident, but an enraged Cleveland goes on TV to call it a hate crime. Peter tries to prove he's not a racist, but all his attempts backfire. Joe places Peter under arrest for attempted murder. Carter offers to help, but Cleveland Jr.'s testimony makes it a hard case to fight. Carter's lawyer tears down Cleveland Jr., calling him a thug and comparing him to Chris Brown. Peter walks away free, and Cleveland calls an end to their friendship. Seeing the hatred directed at Cleveland Jr., Peter makes things right by admitting he shot him by accident. Cleveland realizes Peter's sincerity and takes the blame himself to keep Peter from getting arrested. He lies and says he was the one who shot his own son. The news channels immediately leave, and the two friends make amends. Number 3 has us moving on to a truly bizarre expansion of Peter and Chris's father-son relationship in an episode titled Fresh Air. Chris tries to bond with Peter, who straight up lies to Chris to avoid him. Chris's wealthy grandfather, Carter Pewterschmidt, bonds with Chris, and he is so impressed by Chris's character that he names him the sole heir to his fortune. Peter, wanting a piece of the money, tries to suck up to Chris, even beheading the deaf kid at school he mistakes for a bully. When all that fails, Peter gets the bright idea to propose to Chris, stating that a man can marry any other man in Vermont. Chris sees through Peter's intentions, but agrees anyway to finally get a happy, legally binding relationship with his father. After divorcing Lois, the two head to Vermont. The family crashes the wedding, and Peter finally realizes the error of his ways when Chris confesses his motives. This episode is a clear example of Peter's selfishness and disregard for his family's happiness. Lottery Fever is taking the number 2 spot, with Peter's greed and stupidity almost pushing this to take the title. Peter is already messed up from the start, lying about a pregnant dancer stealing from a show so he can get her removed. When he gets home, Lois tells him they're low on cash, so Peter takes out a second mortgage on a house to buy thousands of lottery tickets. Brian pulls out a winning ticket, and everyone starts listing off what they want. Peter, however, has already bought a room full of gold coins, quit his job, and started buying rounds for everyone at the bar. He starts to take advantage of his friends, forcing them to pre-eat shows for him and eat the worst parts of his food. The worst of all is when he forces them to do a synchronized dance for him while he shoots them with a BB gun, hitting Joe in the eye. Joe and Quagmire walk away, and Peter comes home to a golden tuxedo. Lois calls the family out, but caves when Peter gives her a diamond ring. The family finds out they've blown all their winnings and are back to being broke. Peter apologizes, and Joe tells him he now has a glass eye because of Peter. But, as usual, everyone forgives Peter. And here we are, the number 1 spot, which of course had to go to Brian Griffin's House of Pain. Peter's part in this episode isn't even the main plot, but it's so unbelievably bad that it's winning this list anyway. Peter locks Stewie in the basement after being hit in the head with a toy spaceship one too many times. Meanwhile, Chris and Meg get into a fight, accidentally knocking Stewie down the stairs and giving him a severe head injury. To cover it up, they put him in bed and try to hide the wound. By dinner time, Stewie is still unconscious, and the head wound is getting grosser by the minute. Peter comes in, casually asks how long Stewie has been knocked out, and even praises Chris for not taking him to the hospital. He gives Meg a list of hats to get to cover the wound up as they all settle down to watch TV. Meg advocates for taking Stewie to the hospital, but Peter has one last plan. He throws Stewie under a moving car to cover up the fact that he was knocked out for so long. Lois and Peter then agree to take him to the hospital, and Stewie eventually returns to the land of the living after being unconscious for 8 months.